What's going on, guys? Thank you for tuning in to this new channel of mine, Alter the Beast, where it's a place for all my music related stuff to live. I'm a songwriter, I'm a guitarist, I try to sing, I try to play drums, I play mean bass. But anyway, I also post music related repair videos, and as luck would have it, right? As luck would have it, I was in my home studio the other day recording a guitar track with my Mesa Boogie Mark V. I love that amp. It speaks to my heart and my soul. It is my sound. It is so much a part of, for me, playing guitar as my guitar and my strings. It's like an equal part of that equation. The way the amp responds, it's just like, I gotta have it, you know what I mean? But anyway, I was recording a guitar track, just started doing it too, like, dialed in my levels, and I was throwing down take one. And the freaking amp, and I'll play it for you because I got it on recording. The amp just farts out, like cuts out, like it sounded like I unplugged the lead from the guitar and like touched my thumb to it like a Jerry. And the next thing I know, I'm looking over my amp like, what's going on? The power was on still. I'm like, what happened? The lights are dead on my amp, like no power. I'm like, I've had a problem with this amp before when a diode tube decided to take a dump. It was popping fuses, and that was an easy fix. Replace the diode tube, problem solved, right? Of course, first thing I check, I'm gonna check that fuse, right? Look at the fuse. Fuse looks good. Fuse looks fine. Have my multimeter right here. Continuity test on the fuse. Fuse is good. I'm like, what is going on? Quickly, and thank you, internet, I did some research. And it just so happens I found this technical bulletin. This is straight from Mesa Boogie, and it advises that for the Mark V, this was released in August of 2013 apparently, there was an issue with the diodes that supply the 12 volt power from the transformer. AC to DC kind of circuit. I'm not like the best electrical engineer. I really try to learn this stuff, and I have like just enough knowledge to be dangerous, and I have just enough knowledge to kind of like look at this and be like, oh, I can fucking fix that. We're gonna see though. But sure enough, serial numbers below MK5-10486. So I checked my amp. Sure enough, I'm well below that. I've got like an 8,000 serial number. In any event, it goes through identifying these four diodes that have to be replaced. It gives you a part number with the new diode that you have to install. Basically, unsolder the diode from the PC board times 4. There's 4 of these diodes that have to get replaced. Unsolder the one component, solder in the new component for each of these 4 diodes. The technical bulletin is it looks pretty clear as to where it's pointing these diodes out, where you can find them on the circuit board, and they're under some ribbon cables. There's a couple capacitors near them. Looks pretty straightforward. I'm gonna crack open in the amp right now and try to unsolder the 4 diodes, and I've got the 4 new diodes on order. You can get these from Mesa Boogie apparently. But Mesa Boogie was cool enough to actually give you like the actual part number for the component, so you can go to like digikey.com, because I looked on Mesa's website. I would have gladly ordered these right from them, but I didn't see it on their parts catalog. So I went to Digi and the 4 diodes they say you need to use to replace these are 1N5392, and you can like call that up in Digi Key and like find these. They're like 36 cents each or something stupid. It was extremely minuscule cost. And here again, I'm waiting on the parts. I hope this is my issue, but from what I've read online, this describes my issue to a T. Now, to kind of explain my issue before I play the audio for you so you can hear the issue, the moment of death for my Mesa Boogie Mark V, what I noticed right before it happened, and I even have that on recording, right before it happened, the amp kind of cut out. Like it sounded like it was channel switching a little bit, but I wasn't, operating the foot switch or anything like that. Or here again, I would almost say like I unplugged the lead to the guitar and plugged it back in. It was like a kind of an upsetting noise, but it still played for a second. I was trying to like, what's going on with my amp? I was just strumming nonsense on the guitar, and then it did that again, and the amp was dead after that. So when I went over to the amp when this happened, I could smell that distinct burnt up electric smell. That was the first thing I noticed when I went over to the amp to investigate what was going on. So I'm like, something burnt up. I didn't know it was a tube. It didn't smell like a tube, like, I don't know if I've ever smelled a tube go bad, but it smelled like some sort of solid state kind of component burning up. And then here again, check the fuse, check the power, nothing was going on. Interestingly, it did look like the tube heater circuits were still active at that time when because my amp was still, switch was still on my amp, and looking on the back of the amp, I could see the tubes glowing. That's another symptom of this failure. The circuitry for the tubes is on a different leg of this transformer apparently. And this circuit that's affected, this 12 volt circuit, affects the fan, the lights on the amplifier, and clearly some sort of section of the amp that makes it silent, because the amp did go silent after that. So from what I'm able to gather with people who've had this problem, my amp is suffering from this issue. I'm hoping these components are going to fix this, and I'm gonna crank my friggin' Mesa Mark V again as soon as I can get it fixed. So let's walk through getting this thing taken apart and get it ready for surgery here. So I was working on a song, and if you look at the bottom track, you can see the waveform, guitar 2, track 14, last visible track on the screen here. Kind of farted out there. And I don't come in just yet, so I was like, all right, that was weird. And now that was where that second guitar part, this electric guitar part, would come in on this song I'm working on. So when I strum those two chords, it sounds like dog do. Now at this point, I'm like, what is going on? And that was it. So if we just listen to our electric guitar, yeah. So that was that. Like, that moment that I captured on this audio recording was the last sound my Mark V has made at this point in time. So if you've experienced anything like that, sudden failure, I think this is going to be the fix, so stay tuned. These 5 tubes, they are not all the same. So it's very important to keep these tubes in the present order that they are installed in your amp. The far left tube here is your rectifier tube. It's a 5U whatever tube. And then in my case, I have my 4 6L6 power tubes. You can run EL34s, whatever your power tubes are, they are here. But the thing to remember here is these are supposed to be matched pairs of tubes. I think it's the outsides and then the middle, they're supposed to be matched. So when you order a set of tubes, they typically come from the factory with matching characteristics to maximize the performance of the amplifier. My point, to make it as simple as humanly possible, is keep these 5 tubes in the exact same order you remove them. If you do that, then you should be okay. Nothing to worry about, right? The other thing I do have to mention is with tube amplifiers, there are large capacitors inside this amplifier, that can still be charged with voltage and can potentially be lethal. So you need to be aware of that. If you don't know what you're doing, if you have not serviced electronic equipment before, if you don't understand what capacitors look like and how to avoid getting shocked by them, you're going to need to bring your amp to a service technician. It's that simple. That being said, if you watch the video and you feel confident with what you learn, just be very careful. You really don't want to touch exposed wires and electrical conductive surfaces inside the amplifier willy-nilly. You need to treat the internals of this amplifier as something that can kill you. So, not to scare you, just be aware of that. I'm still here, so I've tinkered with amps before. On the combo version, the transformer has a little nut that helps support it. I just made sure that wasn't like screwed down or anything into the wood. I backed off the tension there. I think we'll be all right. Probably don't need to do anything with that. But to take our tubes off, we got to take this little tube guard off, and it has 3 connection points. And they've just got this little plastic tab. You slide out of the way, and it comes right off. 1, 2, and 3. Here again, very important, it's tube time. I'm going to take my tubes off. You start by folding these little metal wings down. They kind of hold the tube in place, and you just kind of wiggle your tube out. I also try not to touch the glass. I don't think it's a big deal. I don't like having oil from my skin on the tubes, just because I feel like it might cause it to crack. I don't know. I could be wrong. So I'm just pulling these out in order and keeping them in the same order so that when it's time to reinstall them, I really don't have to use very much of my brain. And I'm removing these because I don't want to damage them when I'm working on this amplifier. The preamp tubes, these 12AX7s, they're a little bit smaller. They're in this metal shield. I don't think they're going to get in my way when I'm working. You know, the transformers stick out beyond them. But with these tubes in place, there's just, in my opinion, there's too much that can go wrong. So at this point, reverb disconnected, speaker disconnected. Of course, my power has been disconnected as well. You obviously don't want to be doing any of this with the amp plugged in. Please use common sense. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and there are 4 screws on the top of the amplifier cabinet that are securing the chassis to the cabinet. I'm going to go ahead and back those out, and I believe at that point I should be able to slide this chassis out. It's going to come out the back of the cabinet, and I'm going to just kind of get it free, get it up on my desk where I can work on it, and let's see if we can't fix it, right? Got my Phillips head screwdriver. I don't know, I think it's a number 2. I'm a real stickler for the kind of do things in passes and an X pattern. Screws are deceptively long. I'm supporting this transformer with my hand, although I don't know if I actually need to worry about that. The whole amp seems pretty well supported so far. I know the left side is supported internally on the amp with a small piece of wood, so that's why I chose the right side to support. But keep all your hardware together. Let's carefully, and this here again, you need to be leery of electrical shock. So my little transformer support was kind of pinching it in. Once I was able to move this down, look inside the amp here. I said look inside the amp. Once you look, you can see this little rubber support. Left shoves it up when you turn it that way, and right actually brings it down. So back it down if you're having problems. Another handy piece of advice I'll point out, If you do totally get confused as to which tube goes where, Mesa has put a tube diagram inside your amp. Both the combo and the head versions of this amp have this little diagram, so you can always refer to it if you completely lose your mind, and don't heed my advice of just keeping your tubes in logical order for reinstallation. A little fun fact there. So if you've never been inside an amplifier before, probably looks like there's a lot going on, and there, in all reality and fairness, there really is a lot going on. These are the capacitors over here that have voltage that could potentially kill you. Stay away from this area, please. And if you can't trust yourself or you don't have confidence in doing that, bring your amp to a qualified service technician, please. There is nothing in here worth dying over. That being said, it took me a minute to find these diodes. They're not obvious with all this stuff that's going on, but reading Mesa's literature, it was pretty easy to locate them. They are under this middle ribbon cable. I'm looking at the rear of the amplifier. It's facing me, and I'm just going to lift up on this middle ribbon cable. It just lifts straight up out of its socket. There's no latches or anything. Just carefully do that. You don't want to damage wires or connectors or anything like that. But inside, under that, there are 4 diodes, and in my case, I can clearly see some sort of electrical event has occurred there. All right? I'm like 100% confident now this is my amplifier's problem. What I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to unsolder these. If you've never unsoldered something before, it can be a little bit of a pain. Ideally, I would pull this board out, but that looks like a lot of work. So I'm going to try to solder these from the top part of the board. I am confident I can get solder through the other side of the board because I've done that before. But that's where I'm going to start. I'm going to get my soldering iron out, take these components out, and then when I get the new ones, we're going to solder them back in. So let's do this. Got my soldering iron going. The recommended course of action from Mesa is to make sure that no solder gets in here because you don't want anything to potentially short out. I'm going to just try to do a clean job because I don't feel like removing this main board to unsolder these from the back. If I heat it up and there's a little bit of solder that drips, I'll try to clean it out the best I can. Don't be contacting anything else with the soldering iron you don't intend to solder because it'll melt. Forgive me if the camera falls, I suck. That was fast too. Pay attention, these diodes, they have an anode and a cathode, a positive and a negative. The two on the left have the cathode facing the front of the amp, and then the ones on the right, they have the anode facing, or the cathode facing the rear of the amp. And it's also marked on the board as well with a little rectangle thing. So pay attention. And we're just gonna heat this up. I'm gonna try to lift the component out as well as I do this. Normally I would use some solder wicking. If I had this board out, they have this little ribbon stuff and you can wick solder with it. It's pretty cool, but I don't have room for that. So I've just got my little needle nose. I'm heating up the solder joint and just pulling it out carefully like that. And then I'm gonna do the same thing to the other side of this. Just be very careful. And here again, if you're not confident with this, and by confident I mean certain that you can not damage any wires, then leave it to a pro. But not for me, Siri. I got this. But yeah, you don't want the iron touching insulation on wires and stuff, and these standoffs for your printed circuit boards. You need to be very careful where the soldering iron points, what it's in contact with. It's imperative. I'm just gonna do the same thing here. Fuck. Tape is loose. Oh Lord Jesus. There it goes. Oh dude, this f***ing diode just shattered. This fucker totally blew. Wow. Yeah, this done melted. Looks like it might have my board up too. I don't know. These little needle nose are nice for working with these small components. All right, I'm here again. We had the cathodes on the front on that side, and then these are the opposite. The cathodes are on the back. Not that it matters for removal. This is going to matter when you install your new parts. Positive, negative. This one's melted too. Look at this shit. This is insane, man. Okay. Half of a freaking diode right there. There's the rest of the diode. These diodes like catastrophically failed. And this one is pretty close to this capacitor. Might make it kind of difficult, but we'll get it. Just be nice, gentle, easy, concise, clear, all that fun stuff. Once you got one leg out, it's not too hard to get the other one. All right, the bad diodes are out. Is this wire melted at all? I would blow some compressed air in there just to make sure there's no solder remnants kicking around. Like that. But I'm gonna actually blow compressed air tomorrow when I fire up my air compressor. But yeah, that's a pretty obvious failure. So if you're seeing that inside your amp, there's a safe chance, a safe bet that your diodes have failed. Here it is. Looks like it's go time. We've got some diodes to replace, failed diodes. I've got a soldering iron heating up, and it is time to boogie and or woogie. So I ordered 4 of these diodes. Again, I've got the link for the replacement parts in the description of this video. And I'm gonna use all 4 of these, no room for error. So I wanna be very careful I don't damage anything in this process. I'm gonna just take one out for starters. And what I'm doing, I'm gonna just kind of check on my board here and get a feel for how much of this lead I need to trim. You don't need an excessive amount. I'm gonna have more than what I've removed just because I think it's gonna be a little easier to work with as far as reinstalling on the board. If I pulled the whole board out, I could do a cleaner install, but I'm gonna just kind of take, I don't know, maybe 1/2 inch or so off and start with that. Watch your eyes. Oh, these don't have cutters. With pliers that have cutters, I'll just take a little bit off. I'm gonna do one side at a time, so I've got that going. Essentially, my plan of attack is I'm gonna come in and solder one side in, and then I'm gonna try to flip it down and solder the other side in. It may not look super pretty, but it should be all right. So I did kind of trim it up to how I think it's gonna go. And here again, now it's time to pay attention because these, if you look carefully, there's a little band marked on there. That's the cathode, and it's gonna match the band, the little rectangle band printed on the circuit board. On the left side, looking, I've got the rear of the amp facing me, so the left 2 diodes, the cathode is towards the front. And then on the right 2 diodes, the cathode is towards the rear of the amp. So it is definitely advisable to pay attention to details. And that it does matter because diodes control the flow of voltage in a direction. They're kind of like a check valve. And if you've got the check valve facing the wrong way, the circuit is not going to behave how it was designed to do. Looks like soldering iron is ready to play. I'm going to take my diode here with my needle nose pliers and move it into position. Got my diode, I have the cathode situated properly, and I'm gonna try to do this inside one closest to the wire here. Again, I need to be mindful of the stuff around me. I'm heating the lead of the diode to help kind of get it seated, and then I'm going to flow some fresh solder over that once I have it in position. And I don't want the solder to really go anywhere else but in the hole for this diode. You want to be careful not to have it go anywhere else on the circuit board. And if you move it around as you do it, as your solder is drying, you could end up with a bad solder joint. So just try to be very steady, careful. Let things cool off. All right. So now I've got the one side installed. I'm going to try to get the other side soldered in here. And I'm just using my pliers to kind of carefully bend that lead towards the hole. And this is where having this board out completely would make a much cleaner install. But we are doing the quick and dirty edition of this. So if you look, I've got this kind of lined up with the hole here, and I'm going to heat the lead up with my soldering iron somehow and guide it in with my pliers. I think I did a good job. Very little room to work with some of the wires here, so working carefully is your best bet. And ruining this amp is not an option for me because I can't afford to replace it, and I don't think I want to play guitar without it, so I've got very little incentive here to make a mistake. Okay, I think it's in the proper position. If you're unsure, you can gently lift up on it. It should be firmly attached to the circuit board. And I'm going to flow some solder over this one too. But I think we are good. And a nice powerful light would be awesome. Okay, so I flowed some fresh solder on that, and I'm just gonna carefully kind of move it so it's not in the way with my next diode, and we are gonna repeat this process. And you can see these do stick up off the board a little bit more now, and that's just because I didn't pull this board off so I could get a nice flush install. It's certainly a compromise to do things in this fashion, so be aware of that. You know, if you want an aesthetically pleasing repair job for something you're never going to see, you will probably want to consider pulling out this main board. With the amount of disassembly it looks like is involved with that, as far as the wiring goes and whatnot. I mean, a lot of these wires are soldered to the potentiometers and stuff on the front of the amp. It's like, for me, it's not worth that kind of effort for what is otherwise a rather simple fix. All right, so y'all can see that. Here we go. Same thing. I know where my anode is, or I'm sorry, my cathode. And before I get too committed here, I'm going to try to pre-bend and trim the lead. Just, it's easy to work with when it's not installed. All right, and then get this situated in the hole. Find the hole, then apply some heat. I like to kind of rock it a little bit And sometimes if you're iron, I know mine, the tip gets loose and dirty, so give it a little clean as well. Sometimes that can make life less frustrating for everyone. Alright, got my pliers ready. In the hole, near the hole. Gotta get it in the hole. If you're applying heat and it's not going into the hole, then it might not be in the hole. And just like picture Beavis and Butthead, like, you're not in the hole. Yeah, I want to be in the hole. And there it goes. I could feel it push the solder through once the heat had transferred. I'm just gonna here again kind of flow a little bit of new solder on it carefully, of course. Gotta be careful. Yeah, I don't know, man. Is this iron like not feeling good? Okay. Now, I'll line up my next lead here. I definitely could trim a little bit more off on this one. All right, get our cells lined up, apply heat, and then we wait. I wouldn't be breathing in these fumes if you could avoid it. Okay, so that's in. Here we go. Flow a little bit of new solder on it. Be a bro. So that's those two. That means there's two left. The cathode side will be facing the rear of the amp for these two. These are the right ones. Just here again, trim up. I'm eyeballing it. If you do a little bit better job than I do, you could probably make it look a little bit cleaner. But I'm definitely leaving a little bit of excess as I go, because to me this isn't cosmetically. It's like it doesn't really fucking matter as long as the amp works. I'm definitely focusing my efforts on making a quality repair as opposed to a great looking repair. you shouldn't need to apply great deals of heat either. I think this is like a 30-watt soldering iron. You don't want to overheat anything. And the solder should kind of flow on its own. All right, man. We got one more before we reassemble this and test our work. My favorite part. And these little needle nose are great for manipulating and holding these components, especially as you solder. If you were trying to hold this in your hand and you apply heat with the soldering iron, it's gonna hurt. I've done that. It's not ideal. No one should work that way. All right. And then we'll figure out how to line this last one up. I'm letting this iron kiss all this stuff. I think it's in. I like, when I can get in, I like to let the solder flow a little more like that, but it's hard on these little circuit boards. Okay, well that's that. That's the end of our soldering work, I certainly hope. Before we throw this back in its house, don't forget, I had to disconnect this ribbon wire to access these diodes, so I'm going to reconnect it at this time. And I would highly recommend blowing compressed air into the chassis just to make sure you have no solder bits in there. At the very least, you know, give it a good shake out. The last thing you want to do is have some little tiny piece of solder or wire or lead, if you've been clipping things over your amp, go in there and short something out and make a much more heartbreaking situation than is already at hand. Okay, but I'll go bring this out to my tool shed and blow it out with air, and then I'm going to come back and reinstall. Installation is essentially the opposite of removal. Before I go too much further, I'm just going to, because I feel as though it's probably easier to connect your reverb tank with the chassis not fully installed in the amp. So I'm going to take the two RCA cables that are over here to the right side of the amplifier and connect those, and then I'm going to lift, perfect, and get this thing in position. And it should find its way home, right? All right. So you can always look on the front of the amp to kind of get an idea where it goes. I'm gonna see if I can start getting these screws threaded in here. Probably going to be advisable to lift up on the chassis a little bit as you start to thread these screws. This should not be a struggle, so if something is fighting you or doesn't feel right, don't go too far. Try to figure out if there's something wrong, something's not lined up. There we go. And if you work carefully, you'll have lasting positive results, promise. So I think we're all good to go. Screws are going in easily. I like to tighten things in an X pattern, just from my automotive background. Probably does not matter which way you tighten these. This one feels like it's not lined up. There it goes. That's more like it, my man. Man, I'm dirty too because I was cutting the grass earlier, so I apologize. I was just so excited. I saw the FedEx guy come. I'm like, I know those are my diodes. So Digi Key got me these. I think I ordered them Thursday or Friday, and it's Monday, so it pretty much came over the weekend. I can't really complain about that. All right, so now it is time to put our tubes back in. We pulled these out in a certain order. I want to put them back in the same order I took them out. You're gonna, this time, earlier when we removed them, we fanned these little retaining wings out. We're gonna do the opposite. We're gonna kind of bring them in so that they fit around the chassis of the tube. And each tube has a key, a little keyway, that plastic keyway that it only goes in the slot one way. So be mindful of that and carefully reinstall your tubes. The far left one is of course our rectifier tube, and then we've got 4 power amp tubes. Keep them, if you kept them in the same order, they should be going back in as they came out, which is with the proper matching pairs. So hopefully you were mindful of that detail. If not, better luck next time. So with those secure in the amp chassis, we can put our little tube protector on. I don't know, fellers. I think it's time to give it a test drive. Moment of truth time. To recap, my issue was I had no power lights whatsoever, no fan. Essentially the amp was like, it wasn't even plugged in. So I have a good feeling if I see power lights right out of the gate, I'm gonna be in good shape. Let's see. Nothing. Well, that sucks. All right. Oh, I'll delete this video. Just don't talk to me. After much head scratching and questioning my soldering abilities, I have realized that my diodes failed. They seem to have ruined the board, the connection between this leg of the transformer and the 2 outer diodes. So my course of action now is I need to connect these diodes, the outer ones, to this wire, and I need to do that in the cleanest and most durable way possible. So that's essentially where I'm at. And you could kind of see, looking under diode 18 there, some of that green shielding on the board that wore off when these diodes burnt out. And I kind of saw it like when I was in there, but I didn't realize that this was going to be an issue, because you just think of like roses and flowers and everything's going to work out. In the end, I should have continuity between this point and this point and this point and this point, and I don't. It's important to remember that, you know, sometimes when you do these repairs, there's additional things that are wrong. You got to maintain your composure and a clear head, because there will be these circumstances where it's like, I don't think I did anything wrong. My soldering's a little sloppy just because of the limited room to work here, but I've checked the solder joints and everything. I'm getting continuity everywhere I need to except these connections. The common factor here is the board. There's no continuity between these points on the board. So fingers crossed, folks. I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna rig up a wire. It's probably not gonna be that pretty, but it needs to hold up. This is my frickin' baby, man. The task at hand right now is to repair this Mesa. Like, you know, it's what I set out to do in the first place. But it turns out, as I previously mentioned, the board was damaged by my diode failure, because the trace between diode 16 I figured out connection from the transformer, brown wire to diode 16 and 19. 16 and 19 is bad, and it's bad on the board. It wasn't my shitty soldering, so you can save it. Basically, I'm going to come from the cathode of diode 16 and the anode of diode 19 with these two little red jumper wires. I'm going to put one on right now. And we're just going to functionally connect these together. I like to tin my wires, just kind of pre-soak them with some solder. They call it tinning, I think. And that just helps make the magic happen when it's time. So that's our cathode. The anode is on the front end on diode 19. It's not as easy to attach this one, huh? Hey. Okay, so these are the jumper wires. When I'm making this repair, it's not as ideal as having these things attached to the actual circuit board, because these are kind of going to be loose inside the chassis. I need to take extra care to make sure that all of these connections are insulated and not going to pose a short hazard inside the amp. I love this amp. I don't know if I've said that yet. I'm going to take a little bit of insulation off this brown wire. I'm going to kind of pre-join all these wires so I could solder them in one go. I considered using a wire nut to secure these because I kind of have an electrician background. That's just how we do it. And I even have a nice tiny little wire nut if y'all want to see it. But I'm going to just solder them just to make sure everything is nice and permanent. Try to. There we go. So what I have effectively done is permanently connected this leg of the transformer to the two diodes. This used to actually be a trace that ran under the diodes on the circuit board, and here again it looks like it blew up. I'm gonna just do a meter check to make sure I've got my continuity where I need it. So meter has entered the chat. I did test all my diodes too, by the way. Figured, might as well check them, make sure I didn't screw anything up. Obviously we got continuity there, checking the other lead, continuity there. So we should be golden now. This was the problem. One leg of this transformer had no connection to the other set of diodes. And this rectifier circuit essentially takes alternating current from this transformer, and it needs both phases of that alternating current. So essentially half the circuit was dead. You're not going to get your 12 volt or 14 volt DC output. So hopefully problem solved, right? We're going to find out. I'm going to take this time to carefully start putting this board back together. There were a lot of wires I had to unsolder to get to this level of accessibility, and if I had just known the trace was bad, I wouldn't have had to do this. So learn from my experience. If you've had this problem on your Mesa amp and you're trying to tear into it yourself, it's very likely that the trace on the board failed if you've got diodes that are in half, like I do right there. And that was pretty visible. The green etching was gone on the board, and I should have put two and two together to realize that this was kind of a minor meltdown inside this amp. So I'm gonna take some time, my leisure here to get this board lined up with all the standoffs and pushed back into place, so that I can get everything resoldered on here on its way. I think there's a transformer I unsoldered too. Shit. Yeah, like look, I mean, and if you do get to this level, you know, don't forget anything. I mean, that's the very definition of forgetting, right? But just work methodically and carefully, you know. May the force be with you. All right, so I'm gonna give me some time to get all my shit resoldered on here. This is very straightforward soldering, I hope. I'm gonna just get everything plugged back in. I need to get some electrical tape on this so that it's protected from shorting anywhere. So I will be back when I'm ready to do that and everything is kind of ready to test. And I've got all my tubes pulled out. This was pretty much the next step would have been entire disassembly of the amp. So it didn't go that far, but I felt like I was knocking on the door of that. I don't think you're ready for this jelly. We're going to test it out. Ciao, dog. You mind? Thank you, baby girl. Appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, oh, hold up. One thing I need to do. I need to just put a little magic electric tape on my repair work. That's an appropriate length of electric tape. And this is just so we don't short out on anything metal, the chassis, other wires, etc. With our repair work. This should ensure everything behaves as God intended. Oh my God, man. The anticipation right this second, it's freaking wild. This is still working. 8 ohm thing. Got our power on. If it blows up, it's not my fault. Oh my God. Oh, she lives. Holy f. Give me a minute. I'm gonna get this all bolted back in for the fucking last time, and I'm gonna put some guitar music through it. All right, my brothers in Christ, we're gonna do the ultimate test. Yes, we are. We're going to double dog, make sure the problem has been resolved. So we got lights. It looks like the 12 volt issue is fixed. Good job there, right? However, I disassembled a lot of things to be able to flip that board up and check my work. So I need to make sure that everything functions. It actually makes sound. All right. Oh man. Foot switch is lighting up. We're gonna keep it simple. Start on a clean channel. Oh, it sounds like garbage. That's my auto Flipped everything to 90 watts. Alright, let's try channel 2. No burning smell. Well, I'm floored to have my Mark V back. That was a nail biter for sure. I was pretty confident when I found that tech article that I was on to the right path. Seemed like an easy fix. Did the fix. Didn't fix it. Kind of freaked out on myself. Was doubting the work I did. Had to take a step back, and I thank my dad a lot. I called him up. He's a lot more knowledgeable when it comes to electronics than I am. And just talking through things with him kind of made me take a couple steps back, check some things with my meter, and just looking at that schematic, it's like, okay, you know, wasn't getting continuity between that brown wire on the board and diode 16 and diode 19 on the board. Kind of tells you right there, there's a problem with the board. There's nothing in between them, no other components. And then kind of just thinking even further back from when I was unsoldering those, and we'll pull that up right now, right? You could see the circuit board was damaged. Had I sent this out to Mesa, I don't know what they would have charged to fix it. I don't know if they would have recommended installing a brand new circuit board or do a kind of a fix like I did. All I know is that this repair costed me about 20 bucks for the 4 diodes with shipping, maybe even less than that. It might have been like 15. A couple days, leisurely pace, of course, because that's how I roll, diagnosing it and actually doing the work. And I just want to say, anyone who feels comfortable enough with their skill set to do something like this, you can do it. You need to be meticulous as you disassemble things and unsolder things if you have to escalate the situation. As long as you can use, you know, your phone to take photographs or just have that mind that kind of remembers stuff. Don't give up. If you do make a repair and it's not working, you gotta start with the basic stuff. Get the schematic, get a multimeter, and start checking things. And that was the problem. My board had fried out in addition to the diodes blowing, and we just needed to do a little bypass surgery to get the thing working again. Thank you all so much for sticking with me through this emotional time period of my life. Like and subscribe if you appreciate the video, and I will see you next time. Take care.